Ace Combat 2. This is the sequel to Air Combat, which I've previously reviewed. Once again, it's an air combat game developed and published by Namco in May of 1997 for PlayStation. This game is similar to its predecessor, so a lot of this review will mirror the other one, but I'm also going to highlight differences between the two games. You take on the role of a mercenary fighter hired to suppress a coup d'etat. You get a briefing at the beginning of the game, and that's all the story you get. You start by choosing one of 3 difficulty settings, where higher means you take more damage and enemies are more aggressive. Unlike the previous entry, this has no influence on your starting planes or the consequences of crashing. If you eat dirt, you only need to pay your replacement fee for your plane instead of losing it permanently, so the game is more lenient in that regard. But this is still a non-issue since absolutely nothing is stopping you from just loading an earlier save. The game consists of a sequence of missions which addresses the complaint I had about the last game's navigation system. At various points in the game, you need to choose between multiple missions, and some of them are only accessible by fulfilling hidden requirements. This comes at a total of 30 missions, which is nearly double the last game's. The fact that not all of them can be completed in one playthrough is a good incentive to go at it multiple times. A single playthrough is still very short, taking somewhere between 2 and 2.5 hours, so getting 100% isn't a massive time investment. Beating a mission gives you money based on the default pay and what you destroyed. You can then use that money to buy one of 24 planes and hire wingmen. Although you can spend more time in missions to get extra cash, the game is pretty generous by default, so you can get away with sticking to your objectives. The missions themselves are all very short. The majority can easily be completed in less than 3 minutes. They put you in their own map where, most of the time, you'll need to destroy targets. There is more variety in objectives and settings than in the last game, however, with cities, ravines, mountains, etc. Thankfully, the visuals have received a massive upgrade compared to Ace Combat 1. Gone are the dubious single-color grounds. Scenes are now fully modeled and present various times a day. I think graphics still look fine now. When it comes to the actual gameplay, you can choose between simplified and full controls, and I strongly recommend the latter. This time around you can actually use analog sticks, which makes maneuvering so much better. Every plane has missiles and a machine gun which no longer has an ammo count. You have a fuel gauge, but even in the longest mission I didn't go below 75%, so it's a non-issue. The controls are still very easy to get a hang of, so anyone can play this game. Because each jet has the same armament, there is no special roles like bombers, but they do have stats guiding their ability to lock onto air and ground targets separately. A small novelty is that the game will ask the player to land on a runway or a carrier at the end of certain missions. It's not terribly difficult, but it's the most complicated maneuver the game will ask you to do. You can now only choose between 2 different wingmen instead of over a dozen, but you can give more detailed orders to them. Not that it matters, since the best they can do is offer a mild distraction to the enemy. The soundtrack still has that 90s flair and it has some killer tracks. Voice acting is subpar, but that hardly matters. Speaking of which, this is the only numbered entry which features a voiced protagonist. Well, sort of. He has about 2 inconsequential lines in the entire game. The game has an improved lasting appeal with the addition of ace fighters, which are tougher enemies you can hunt for medals and paint jobs, and an extra mode for the campaign which lets you play with a completely different set of planes. Much like its predecessor, Ace Combat 2 is a small game, but it definitely has more meat on its bone. Playing through it multiple times yields rewards, and it's definitely a more enjoyable experience thanks to the improved controls and visuals. I definitely recommend playing it.